So in this presentation called Designing with Light, I hope that we can look at it as with beginner eyes. Back when you first started architecture and started incorporating light, what I'm hoping is that you get some ideas that maybe you had remembered from a long time ago that you could bring back to your designs, or some pieces of information that you could bring as you talk to lighting designers or other people about lighting. That's my hope. Please ask questions during it. I can answer all questions. So my background, I got my master's in industrial design, and I was designing a bunch of things, and then I moved to lighting. I really love the idea. I really love looking at lighting. I always have. And it really jives with me. So I was at Peerless Lighting, as you said, and I was there for about 8 years. I started designing the luminaires, doing product development, and then by the end, I was running the brand. So everything from product strategy in the very beginning, helping with design, working with the engineers, manufacturers, even marketing and sales. So I could really take the initial idea at the very beginning and come out with that to make sure that I was creating light that helped, that worked in a space and really worked with the architecture. Then I moved to innovation and strategy, worked with some great companies. And then for the last year, I've been at 16500, working with architects to really help them have their vision come to life with light. I also live in the East Bay with my wife and 2 daughters, and I love to paint. That's part of what I love about light. I love painting light. So today, the learning objectives, so there's 3 learning objectives. Really understanding key lighting terms. These might be reviewed, but again, maybe there's 1 or 2 things you can take away. Identify characteristics of good lighting design. So we'll look at how effective lighting solutions really impact user experience and spatial perception within the space, which is of course what you all do as well, creating these volumes and spaces, but how does lighting add to that? And then we'll explore fundamental lighting techniques of how to incorporate light into architecture. So let's start with some naming light. The lumen. That is what we think of as light coming out of a luminaire, is the lumens. That's light output. And I know back in the day, a long time ago, I used to go to the store and my mom would say, oh, buy a 100-watt light bulb, right? Which they don't have anymore. But it was all about watts. We knew how many lumens came out. We talked in watts. Now with different light, the different luminaires we have and the different lights, it's about lumens. So to get a little deeper, lumens is the amount of light coming out of that fixture. But we also think of what is the amount of light on a work surface, for instance, and that's illuminance. But as you look at that surface, that's luminance, and that's candela per meter squared. So there's different terms, and as you think about working with a lighting professional, they might talk about the light on the wall and how it reflects off. And I just want you to think about all the different, right, that's lumens coming out, but it's also how many lumens, or actually we call them foot candles, on the wall. So that's lumens, illuminance, luminance, and then foot candle is just what it said. It's one candle, 1 foot away, a foot by a foot, that much light, that's 1 foot candle, which equals 1 lumen. So questions just in how to name the light. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So as we think of light, there's different characteristics we think about. One is how warm or cool the light is. And so that's color temperature, and it's measured in Kelvin. So Kelvin's an absolute scale, so it goes from 0 all the way as high as you can go. And it actually, we think of the light, it's on this black body curve, it's called. before I get to show what the black body curve, imagine taking a piece of iron and sticking it in the fire. As that iron starts heating up, it goes from orange to yellow to white and then to blue hot. That's those colors we're talking about. The only thing that's a little confusing is as you get higher Kelvin, so more heat, it's actually getting cooler color. So the blue, as you see, that's the higher Kelvin temperature, and that's a bluer color temperature. Right? So the cooler color temperature is blue, so color theory. A warmer color temperature is that yellow-orange, but it's opposite of how the Kelvins work. So let's go into the black body curve. The black body curve is that one up top, and you can see in this space of light, this is our visible light on a graph. And you can see how it starts in the red, goes to the orange-yellow, hits that more white before it goes into blue. So that's that black body curve that we talk about. So that's on that one side. On the left side, those ellipses are called McAdams ellipses. And what those measure is one color in this color field. So for each McAdams ellipse, that's supposed to be one specific color. So binning, that's another way that people talk about light. So if a manufacturer has a one-step McAdams ellipse bin, that means all of those LEDs have been tested to that one color. I've been in lighting for a while. I can barely tell the difference between two McAdams ellipses. It is really hard. Half the people on the street can't see the difference between three McAdams ellipses. So you know, as a manufacturer starts talking about binning one-step or two-step binning, which is this McAdams ellipse, that's how you know if you get 1,000 different downlights in a project and it's one-step McAdams ellipse, they will all be exactly the same color. Two-step, I can't see the difference, really.
On this diagram, the ellipses are like the little circles within the bigger.
Yes, exactly. And as you focus in, they get smaller and smaller, yes.
And one step is moving from one to a next.
One step is the ellipse itself. So as you focus in, so you see on this side, there's an ellipse around that 5,000 K. I don't know if you can see up in here. That is a McAdams ellipse. That's one color. That's one step.
Oh, when you say two-step, like you have three green ones, is it three green?
No, it's just a bigger ellipse that has inside of it two smaller ellipses. So
what characterizes, I don't understand what the ellipse is, what is it intended to be?
an ellipse is the shape. It's the shape on this diagram. So this is a diagram of all the colors. As you zoom in and see the black body curve, it's not a circle, it's not a square, it's an ellipse that shows the color. No, the color variation in this, in all color, in all of a color field. So all the, this shows all of our visual light color in this diagram. And so McAdams was the one who came up with this idea. How do we talk about color? And so as you zoom in, he created these ellipses for each color. And it gets very detailed as you get in. The ellipses can be, the smallest ellipse is one step. McAdams ellipse is a very tight, and in this color field, that shows one color in the color field. I should have had another, so if you look in the one to the left, that big one on the top green, all that color in the same, there's no difference in that color is what he was saying. That's one McAdams ellipse. And as you get deeper in towards the purple, they get smaller because the color's changing more rapidly in this diagram. This is only a diagram of our visual color field. This is just one way of looking at color. And if, so we think about color temperature, this is one way to make sure that you're getting one color temperature in a project, is to hear what binning is. And what they're talking about is binning is how many macadam's ellipse they choose from all of the LEDs that are made. They test them and they put them into this color field and say, here are all the ones in this one color. Because what can happen is, you see above and below the black body curve, the color changes slightly. It could still be 5,000 K, 5,000 Kelvin, which we know, but that's only that one point on the black body curve. As you go up, it gets a little green, and as you go down off of that black body curve, you get a little more pink.
Okay, in the diagram in the upper right, I see two ellipses, one on the left and one on the right.
Yes.
Now, if there's a kind of a purple or a turquoise line or something, if I go up that line from one ellipse to the other, I'm still gonna be going through different colors.
Yes, so what that's showing is color tuning, which I'll get to in a bit. But it's saying, let's say you had this luminaire has different LED, if this was LEDs, which it's not. If it's LEDs, and you're saying maybe in the daytime you want it to change, maybe at nighttime you want it to be a little more yellow, a little more calming to me in my eyes at night, whereas in the day you want it to be more blue, kind of like what happens outside with the sun. So what this is showing is this going from 2,700 Kelvin, in that more yellow, to 5,000, so more yellow to more blue, and it's showing how the color changes throughout going from that color to the other
But
color.
along that line,
Yeah.
I mean, there may be dozens or hundreds of ellipses.
Hundreds, yes. But what the manufacturer will talk about for the LEDs is the two colors at the end, which is what they put on their LED strip. They're putting 2,700, 5,000, 2,700, 5,000, and that's how they populate it. Those they're choosing very specifically. Maybe they wouldn't actually talk about color binning if you're going from one color to the other, because it doesn't matter as much. Whereas if you have downlights and they're all 2,700 K, that's where it might matter a lot more, especially how close they are. You can really start seeing the difference. I don't know if you've gone into a room and noticed different color temperatures. That's what we don't want, unless you as the designer are doing that for some reason. But ultimately, if you want to keep the color very consistent, that's why you're thinking about binning.
No, I'm looking at those two lights there, I think they're different color temperatures.
For fluorescence, it's very easy to get different color temperatures, even though they're called the same thing, because they're using phosphors on the inside, and different manufacturers have different recipes, so yes. And that's what we don't, and that's what everyone, because remember, 2010 is when I started designing luminaires. I designed one luminaire with fluorescent, and past that was all LED. So before that, everyone's thinking about these and saying, how do we make sure we don't get that? And that's why people are starting to talk about these steps. So a lot of manufacturers are promoting one-step macadam's ellipse so that I know, you know, that the light is consistent, the color, where you're not getting two different fluorescent tubes that look different.
Is that because, I mean, we should get off this slide, but I remember when it was the wild, wild west of LEDs, when I took classes at the PG&E Center, I think they talked about different manufacturers could be completely different colors. Is that part of that?
This is what we don't want.
Yeah.
Back in the day, when LEDs were coming out, certain manufacturers were above the black body curve or below the black body curve. That's not what we want. We want to make sure we're on the black body curve to get the 2,700K that's a real 2,700K.
Just to take this over. So I've never heard of this, but I have picked luminaires based on a CRI. Is that related to this?
Let's go into CRI.
Excellent.
It's related.
Very good, Carl.
It's a great question. CRI is different. The binning is more about the color temperature of the LED itself. CRI is color rendering index, and it's how well the light renders color. If you think when you're outside in the sun, that's 100%. The sun renders color perfectly. So that's our 100. As we think about going in the 80s, you walked into an office and your skin was all pale and it looked horrible. A lot of times that was CRI of 70, which you see over here, right there. The color just gets sucked out of things. Then, even 5 years ago, LED manufacturers had a consistent CRI of 80, and that was standard. And now we're seeing a lot more manufacturers standard CRI 90. But just to note, CRI is just these R1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. It's kind of those muted colors. So a lot of people might ask you for R9, which is that red, because skin has a lot of red in it. People want to know how we look under color, so they're going to ask, how well does what's the R9 value? So now as we get even more detailed into how color is rendered and how far off the black body curve you are, there's this TM30. And this is kind of the ultimate way of thinking about color. Still about color rendering. A lot of manufacturers give the TM30 data for their luminaires. So what we're looking at here, there's two different ways of looking at it. Excuse me, fidelity and gamut. At the bottom is fidelity. There's 100 or 99 different colors, and it takes the average. It measures all those colors and takes the average for a number between 0 and 100. And then the gamut is up here, these top circles. The white circle is what the sun should produce. That's the color the sun produces, how well. So what we're seeing here, that first one on the left, it really pushes up into that yellow. So we know that it enhances yellow. It's not exactly like the sun. This luminaire, if you put it under something, enhances yellow. So if you think about, let's say you're lighting the entryway for a brand that has a blue logo, and the blue logo is behind the reception desk. You want to make sure you're going to look at the light, make sure that it's pumping a little more blue so that pops off of the wall. So that's one reason why we're looking at TM30, but also it's really to know exactly what colors, how the light renders color. Okay, I can stop for a second if there's more questions here.
What strikes me is that this notion kind of assumes that the colors of space are going to be constant through the life of a building. In fact, they be changing all the time. And so I wonder if the color questions taken to this level of detail are really as useful as other aspects of lighting design.
I think that's a great point out. And so I used to work at Williams-Sonoma, where I was designing the dinnerware and there was someone else designing the linens. We had a box inside that we would go in and it would be sunlight, so know, are they really the same color? Then there was the lights inside of the store. What's it gonna look like inside the store? Then we had typical lights inside of a residence. What's it gonna look like inside? So for something like that, it is very particular.
I think they're
For other things like here in this room,
have,
not as particular.
I am in
But if there is an accent wall like the red in the back, and you wanna make sure it's rendering
oh
the
yeah, shading and
brand
lighting,
color
yeah,
red,
that stuff. Yeah,
that's
so
important.
oh,
Things like that. But you're right, there's a lot more things to take into account. This is just
yeah,
characteristics of lighting as we think about it.
yeah, let me. Yeah,
So basic LED, just to remind everyone, there's the LED chip, that's that blue thing in the
You're gonna
middle,
have to do the picture.
covered with phosphor coating. Usually that's a blue pump LED. Sometimes it's different, there's some amber. Anyway, it has a phosphor coating that gets the color we want. It is soldered to a circuit board, and then there's a heat sink. Ultimately,
Then they can say, well. it was already like
LEDs
that.
don't like heat.
Dispute, but it's-
So you can start seeing some manufacturers talk about copper core boards. And they're talking about that because that's for heat management, knowing that it won't degrade over time. So a lot of people are starting to talk
Like, look at the lease because.
color, about their binning, and about
Do a move-in, then
You know,
everything-
on downlights, there's those huge heat sinks.
Depending on how
That's
it's
to
built
pump
out.
the
maybe
heat up
that's-
out of the LED chip, and then there's air that can dissipate that. That's the whole idea, is to keep the LED as at consistent temperature as possible. So, as you see these green arrows, the light coming out of an LED just comes out in all directions.
I'm gonna do a quick.
So you see the one that says direct light, that's how light comes out when there's nothing around it to change the light, and that's called the Lambertian distribution. Just, the other way I think of it is just a blob of light. There's many different light distributions and many different reasons to have different light distributions within a room. So if we think of this room, these are indirect, direct lights. There's lighting on the ceiling that's reflecting off, that's giving us some more ambient light, and then there's more directional light down. These are our Peerless lights, so I'm not gonna say it's too bad. These were designed, the tubes were very big. It's very hard to make the light do what you want as it comes out bigger. So something like an LED, which is so small, it's much easier to make it do what you want it to do. So for instance, I would like for these to have you see this one that says Batwing? The red is showing how the light comes out of that luminaire. So it's really throwing the light down the ceiling so that you don't have a big dark spot in the middle. So there's a lot of different lighting distributions. As you look at these polar plots on the right, ultimately how you get these is there's this big sphere, you put the light in the middle, it has a big mirror, and it goes around at all of these different angles and measures the amount of light, and that's what the polar plot is showing. So as you go around it, out of this part of the LED, or this part of the luminaire, it's going like this, but maybe down it, it's just a circle. I know I don't need to get into that as much, but ultimately, LEDs without optics come out in a big Lambertian. So you want to use optics to make sure the light's doing what you want it to do. Finally, there's many different ways of doing optics. I'm not going to get into the details here. Just know that you want some kind of optics on an LED so that it's doing the work, so the light's going to where you want in your design. You don't want light just to come out anyway, unless that's how you want that specific light to be. If I go back here, the polar plot in the middle, that's a yellow. That's showing a downlight with a very narrow beam. Sometimes you want that very narrow beam to really pinpoint one piece of art or one part of a table in a restaurant. So as you think about optics, there's many different ways to do it, but it's putting the light where you want it. And that's where you really need to think, where do I want the light? And how do I talk about it so someone understands, so they can help you specify. So this is lighting terms. Other questions about lighting terms?
So you have the luminaire, and you used to have a lamp. Are LEDs still called the lamp, or?
Yeah, there's the board. They're called the LED boards, and there's COBs, which is the chip on board. Yeah, thank you. Or there's linear ones. There's a lot of different. They're not really called the lamp anymore because it has to be part of a system. You can't measure it separately from the heat sink and the driver. So it has to be a luminaire altogether. Yeah.
I still don't understand the black ellipse or whatever it was is that just, what is that? Like,
You know how somebody explained it to me? Think of it like ombre. Like when you have like a series of blue colors and it changes from dark to light. Think of an eclipse like ombre. In that little eclipse, you might have very subtle variants of that color. And then as you go between eclipses, it becomes broader and move into different colors.
that one curve that you had, what is the importance of that curve?
That shows when you heat up iron, the colors that come out of that iron. So it starts red, orange, yellow, to that white, and that's different clean whites. That's as we think about white light, we think about heating up a piece of iron.
I think of LEDs as being kind of directional. So if I want a light that shines down and shines up, got two LEDs facing different directions?
That's one way to do it. Another way is this light pipe. You can do it where it comes out. You have LEDs facing in. There's many different ways of creating that, but that is the most typical, is to have lights down, LEDs down and LEDs up, but there are other ways to do it as well. You can still reflect, you can steal some of the light that's going up to pull it down if you want just it to glow down, for instance.
But the LED itself is really just going out mostly in one direction.
Yep.
180 degrees.
It's
less.
just, yep, it's just throwing light out. Yep. So as you think about what you want it to do, you can start looking at what optics are being used or how that is being created in the luminaire. Okay, so 4 typical types of lighting. Ambient lighting, we'll go through these. Ambient lighting, as you see over here on the left, task lighting, just those middle lights are on for the task on the surface. Accent lighting, that one over here, it's just where you have your eye go to those places, not the light the whole space, and then decorative lighting. So I'm going to go through these. Ambient lighting, as I said, is just general lighting. These are for ambient lighting, just general lighting in a space. There's different ways to do it. We can do it all indirect, to use the white, for this, in this room, the white ceiling, to reflect it so there's no glare. But sometimes, you know, being out in a cloudy day, it just feels like you're in a marshmallow or kind of. There's no definition. So indirect light kind of has that type of light, whereas direct light has more shadow. You get to see what the face looks like a little better. But a lot of times with downlight, direct light, there's glare. And so if you notice in this image, these cylinders, the light is recessed a little bit in, so you don't see the actual light source, but it's still giving usable light, ambient light for this office. So, but you need to think about, a lot of times you go into a house and it has all those downlights and they might be big old ones, and there's just a lot of glare, or at least I noticed that. And that's what you're trying to cut down on for this, some of the ambient light. Then there's task lighting. And that's putting the light on a surface that you're doing a task. In this image, the restaurant, right, what are you doing? You're looking at the menu and maybe looking at your food. And so there's a nice tight beam on that table for you to do those things. Or in this one, you see the table on the left is lit up perfectly, and the bar looks like it has some task lighting on it. But there's not much ambient light. Right, it's a very soft, there's some accent light on the piece of art on the left, but it's a different, this is more task lighting for doing what you need. Accent lighting then is to accent some art or architectural details or to lead your eye somewhere. So here, the accent lighting is on the pieces of art. And then, you know, you can call that accent lighting or task lighting when you're on the bench. That's it. That was all that was needed here. Here, the accent lighting is that colored light on the architecture to really show you, here it is, here's the entrance. There's task lighting on those tables that are outside, straight down lights. And then inside, there's more ambient light in that restaurant. So that's how you can start seeing all the different. Here's a very great view of accent lighting in a residential setting. Just those little alcoves are lit. Then there's uplight along the window, uplight underneath the fireplace. So those are all the accent lighting. You imagine if you have people over and you don't want much light, that's what you put on. Or then there's that's more ambient light, is the table lamp. And then that's the decorative light in the middle. Wall washing would be a type of accent lighting, and what's great about washing the walls is it really makes the space seem bigger. And there's different ways to do it, and it depends how much texture is on the wall. There's wall washing, which is, as you see here, the light is off of about a foot off. It could be a foot to 2 feet. That's called a wall wash. If they wanted to show the texture of that wall, they would put the light closer, and that's called a wall graze. A graze, Graze, because it's really grazing down and creating those shadows so you really can see the texture. Don't use a wall graze on a wall like this that we have, because it's hard to get a flat wall, as we all know, and you don't want to show off those imperfections. But a wall wash will wash the wall with even illumination. Decorative lighting is just that. It's just to create a place to look, create some beauty. It does give off light, but it's more about the light, the luminaire itself. So you imagine coming into a space on this one on the left and just seeing these beautiful lights, or this is the same luminaire, or coming up this stairway and seeing this would be beautiful. Or something like this, hospitality. It makes a lot of sense that this is the area where you're hanging out, and here are these decorative lights, but it's still giving off ambient light as well. Questions about the different types of light? Okay.
Are there questions in the chat, Mike? No?
Perfect.
One little thought. In my experience, I like to be able to have a variety of lighting choices in a room. Different settings, I want to light it differently. And so, turn this one on, this one off.
Yeah, and I'm getting to that, layered light. That is the whole point. Yes. So as we look at what lighting does in architecture, I would assume that these same 3 things you think about for your architecture itself. And it really, the lighting and the architecture go hand in hand. You can't have interior architecture without light unless it's daylit and you don't use it at night. And lighting is really about enhancing the architecture. So what lighting does is it shapes how the spaces are perceived, supports the activities in that space, very functionality, and then emotionally, it really affects mood and behavior. We can do many things to this light to make this space feel different as you walk into it. So we're going to go into these. So it guides visual focus. So for this room, if I'm walking into a room like this, what do you imagine happening here?
Meeting.
Yeah, there's light on the table, and maybe I'm showing some kind of rebranding or something on these walls, because the walls are lit up. Visual focus, I know exactly what we're doing in a space like this. Where here, I definitely need enough light to go up and down those stairs. And then you see on the floors themselves, it looks like it's retail. I need enough to see and to show off what I'm selling and what I'm buying. And then you even see along the architecture, it really shows off the curve of the architecture itself. It's doing a lot of work, the light, in this space. Something like this, I imagine this is the space between, you're going to a theater maybe, coming off of the street, and then you're in this space, and it really gets you excited for what you're going to. It really creates that atmosphere and mood. And we can do that with color, we can do that with spotlighting things, adding drama. You come around an area and then you see a light. There's many different ways to add this atmosphere and mood. So let's talk a little just about uniform illumination versus targeted accents. There's reasons for both, but if you think uniform illumination is really distributed light, making the room appear larger and more open. You see this museum, you know who's there, it's very uniformly lit. Yes, there's the highlights on the art, but it's really about the space and the art itself. Whereas this next one on the right is about creating that kind of cozy, comfy, secluded, where I'm the only one in this gallery looking at this one piece of art. It really feels different. Or here, this one on the left, mostly in an open office, you want even illumination, so so it's easier on my eyes than going back and forth between dark and light. Whereas in a church, I might want to be shown where the focus is. I'm coming in, it's not on me out in one of the pews, it's about what's going on and creating the light. This targeted accents to show where and what this space is about. And then we get to putting this all together, which is layering light. So in something like this, what are some of the layers you see? There's the accent.
Great lighting,
Say again?
great lighting.
Yep, there's, I would call that, accent lighting that's creating, or creating, and it's underneath the wall as well as on top of the wall. Those downlights are some ambient light, but a little more detailed, probably task lighting for the sofa. There looks to be task lighting on this, this is the kitchen, on that surface.
Decorative light.
That decorative light, and that probably puts off a lot of ambient light for the space. And there's different, if you're watching a movie, maybe you'd want just those accent lights on very low. If you're having a party, maybe it's those down lights plus that. You see, as you were talking about, having different options, that is that's how you create a wonderful lighting design.
And there's a really big difference in color temperature that's far away and close, and I'm not sure why, but.
It's interesting to see that, yeah. Maybe those ones, I would imagine, those accent lighting on the wall are color changing, and so it could be any color, and maybe they just made it different than those downlights that look very warm. But yeah, and the light that's coming in out of those windows in the back is a very cool light, so maybe any light would look very warm. Here, two other ways to do it. There's those decorative in the middle, but it's giving off ambient light. That square around that area is really defining that area with light and creating ambient light. The downlights on the hallway, adding a little more light so you know that hallway, so that's more task light, and then task lighting in each of the phone booths. Whereas the other, it looks like there's just one type of luminaire, but they're doing different things. There's wall wash, there's task lighting, there's ambient lighting for just those downlights are doing all of that work. How about this one to the left? What are the different lights you see?
Uplights,
Those uplights, creating more ambient light
yeah,
by reflecting it off, that indirect.
and task lighting.
And with the beautiful, and it's also decorative. I love those. In the back,
Some kind of cove, I don't know what it is, in the landscape, I can't tell.
yeah, some light out there to really accent certain parts. And then this one on the right, there's those downlights, those little pinpricks in the ceiling, small, that are accenting, or that are on over the different sofas. And then there's the decorative in the middle. And then around the ceiling looks like it's a drop ceiling with light behind it. So here, again, one luminaire type is doing a lot of different things. You're still getting all of these layers of light. There's the ambient lighting. Those big ones in the middle look like they're giving off pretty general lighting, whereas the downlights are specifically placed and probably focused on certain things. And then you see at the reception, it's more of a wall wash and really focusing on that logo.
So are there still the same rules with track lighting? Because I thought watts per square foot, track lighting is kind of like danger zone.
That's thinking back, having halogens or having different types of light with LEDs. Well, there's much less wattage. If you think of one of these might be 9 watts, and then you start doing the math in that.
Right, traditional MR16 was commonly used in track, largely because of the color, the halogen and that Christmas. Those were 50, all in, 50, 40, 56 watts.
Right.
1/5 of the draw.
So
So
it's just,
it's come a long way.
Yeah,
so you don't have to worry about it as much.
as much. You still need to do the calculations,
Yeah.
but it's easier to use. And there's a lot, and because you're doing all the lighting with this, how great to have that one track that you're doing, that's doing a lot of work for you. Yeah.
What's illuminating the ceiling? Just the reflected light?
It looks maybe in where it looks like it's the reflected light to me.
Because it
There-
seems like with all that directed downlight that would be in shadow.
True, it might be over, but in the reception, there might be some uplight, it looks like. Maybe those have some uplight in them, or that one. No, it's a good question. Because it does feel like there's a lot reflecting back.
Yeah, but it's concentrated at the wall, so it looks like it's reflected off of
The-
the
The desks?
Yeah, the desks and the table.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's really much dark. I think it's just like a high exposure photograph.
could be.
And I was kind of wondering whether or not architectural photographers take it the next step, because it's like inefficient here. I mean, I tweak photos all the time.
Yeah. No, good point. That's a good point. Something like this, though, that cove, maybe not the way I would do a cove. I would want more of the light to go into the ceiling. But let's talk about the different layers. So you got the cove light, that's the accent lighting. What else?
The decorative chandelier type things.
Yep.
And then the accenting the locations of the.
Yep, or task, because you're looking, it's actually helping with the numbers as well. But yes, another layer of light. And I love how those chandeliers get multiplied in all those different openings to really show that this is this space, and that space.
I wonder if this would be better if those lights around the ceiling were not white, but were going in a different color direction.
Would love that. Yep, color tuned or RGB, the red, red, green, blue. So, which means you can make any color with it. Yeah, I would love that. So here's a lot of different layers. What do you see?
Ambient lighting.
The downlights are the ambient,
downlights.
or those linear are more ambient. You see the linear?
Yeah.
I could see them because that's more indirect, direct style.
Kind of a decorative light / uplight, I guess, I'm not sure.
That
The
one,
wiggly guy.
yeah, that wiggly guy looks like it's being lit by those, could be lit internally. Yep, that's a more decorative. And those downlights have focusing on them. You can see they're a little bigger, so I wonder what they're put right on that tree in the middle, maybe.
And there seems to be some kind of directional lighting with the linear lights. I don't know if it's a circulation zone or,
Yeah, those linear.
yeah.
And then there's that around the kitchen. There's that drop ceiling, kind of with the downlights, creating that sense of space.
And then there's individual task lights like at seating or something. down
Yep,
there?
yep. And even in the back, there's those individual task lights as well. Yeah, so there's a lot of different lights in this, a lot of layers. So we'll look at two small case studies. So this one is in San Antonio, Texas. And I wish I had my notes. The architect what was hard about this, so there's a lot of these 3-inch downlights and pendants, that's all they use. 10 to 18-foot ceilings, and they use a 3500K, which I know for me is more, feels more like office, but what they wanted to do was highlight the gray interior color. So if we look at this, what they wanted is to figure out the light output on an 18-foot ceiling you see in the living room, the 18-foot ceiling, you need a lot of lumens coming out to light something that far down, but they didn't want it to be glary. So really working the lighting designer and the architect had to work together to see what types of lights could fit and how many lumens to make sure you're getting what you want. It's also washing the walls, and then there's these decorative fixtures as well to create spaces.
So is the choices of the recommendations of the lighting designer somewhat speculative, or in a situation like this, are they doing some kind of visual modeling so that they can actually look at the result before you actually get there and build it?
Oh, that's exactly what they're doing. That's what lighting designers or reps can help you with, is really how much light. So before we put these in, we don't know what this room is going to look like. So there are a few different programs that lighting designers use to do those calculations.
And you give a visual result that allows an architect to make a visual judgment.
There are visual ones, yes, yes. And there's to show, here are the different levels of light, and here's what only one on, here's what two on, here's what that second one only, or the third. Yes, that's exactly what they can help with, and that's how they help someone who's very visual, an architect, see what it could look like.
And samples to see
Yeah.
that color, right? If you have a space that's in development, or you have a color palette, for example.
Yep. Or see how the wall wash will look by putting it up.
Are these programs available to architects, or are they in the industry, or in the lighting industry?
They're available to anybody, but it takes, just like you had to learn to use some of the programs you use, it takes time to learn how to use some of these programs. And knowing that you all need to know some about everything, this is very detailed work. So knowing that you can come to people who only do this detailed work can help.
So, do these programs start with a photograph of the existing space or a rendering?
They create this space, actually. It's created just like you create certain spaces in
3D
computers.
model.
Yeah, so it's a 3D model, and then the light output, different manufacturers give you certain files that show the light output. As I said, like a batwing distribution up, or Lambertian down, or very focused. You put that into the luminaire that you put in there, and it shows and it calculates what the light looks like. And there's different ways to do it. There's visual ways, or there's ways just to say, I need a calculation. I know I need 30 foot candles on the work surface. Will this get me to that? And there's different ways to show. I have a slide in a bit where it shows the different, oh, here's 41 foot candles, here's 27 foot candles. Okay, but an average of 30, that's what we're looking for. So one more case study. Tony's Restaurant in St. Louis. They used adjustable 3-inch downlights, and it served many different roles, where they illuminated the art and walls, as well as provided the task lighting for the dining room. And what they did is they used a 12-degree adjustable beam angle for those tables, so that you put them where you want them, but if tables move, you can adjust them. They put a lot of lumens coming out, so 1,200 lumens, so that during the day it could be light as they wanted, but then at night they can dim them down. 2,700K and a black finish. So why do you think they would use that warm of color and with the black finish?
To minimize the reflected light within the can.
Don't see.
Yeah. As you see, they kind of go away because there's no hot coming off it. Exactly. So they wanted a very calm ceiling, and then the warm color. What do you think? For the wood, to create a beautiful warmth inside the restaurant. Exactly. So, key takeaways as you take early collaboration. If you have a big project, early collaboration with a lighting designer will help your design vision come to life. Because you're designing these spaces, a lot of times LEDs have remote drivers. So really understanding maintenance. So talking with your lighting rep or talking with whoever's the engineers. For downlights, for instance, how do you get into them? What do I need to design to make sure you can get into them? And then tailored solutions. I know a lot of architects go away from custom lights. And I get 100% custom lights are expensive. But if you're putting a wall wash and you want to make sure that 6 inches of a wall isn't dark, but it doesn't say on the spec sheet that it goes that far, those tailored solutions are very easy for a manufacturer to help make it the way you want it. So ask about those early on. So what I'm hoping is that you can master the basics, understand the different words to use when specifying light. So now you understand a bit more lumens, CRI, and color temperature. Just like you're thinking about spaces, good design makes a space functional, it creates a certain mood, and it really completes your design aesthetic. Same thing with lighting, excuse me. It makes the space functional, creates a mood, and enhances that design, the design intent. Layering is key. We talked about, look at all the different layers in here. There's wall wash, there's ambient, there's some task lighting, creating a sense of space with those decorative luminaires. And then collaboration really matters. If you're going to work with someone, make sure you bring them in early on so that you're designing in tandem to create that design intent that you originally had, to make sure it comes at the very end. And then so finally, lighting isn't just a finishing touch. It's a foundational element of great design. So with that, I also wanted to just touch on what 16500 does so that if you want to use us, you can. We work with specifiers, architects, end users, owners, the general contractor, electrical contractor, distributor, to make sure that the vision in the beginning is what it actually produced at the end. And we do all of this legwork so you don't have to. We have a whole team that's behind me that works on photometrics and calculations, so understanding what the light, how much light you're going to have. We can help with that. Fixture selection. Oh, I'm looking for something. I have a wood ceiling and I want it to fit in the slots. What do you have? Budgets. Oh, I know I can't be here. We need a beautiful luminaire, but I need all these other things, and this is what we have budgeted. Oh, we can help you with that. Or technical support. So I didn't get into this, but the Illumination Engineer Society has recommended practices for how you should light certain spaces. Good to know. It is a lot to know. As I said, you all have a lot to understand, so coming to us, we can help you with that. Oh, an open office should be 30-foot candles on the table. Oh, easy. Hospital. Oh, we need 50 to 100-foot candles, depending on what it is for the doctor to see them. Things like that. And then we do these lighting calculations. As you can see, the numbers are very small, but those showing foot candle calculations at different spots. By putting the luminaires in, putting the light outputs, and we know how big the space is. We also help with design and application support or controls. And we do things like this and create bombs for what the controls for the luminaires are. So, with that, we also wanted to invite you this next Wednesday on the 19th in San Francisco at the People Space, which we'll talk about in a second. One of our manufacturers, USAI, which is downlights. They do beautifully controlled downlights at very different price points. But we'd love to invite you. We have, we can pass these out. And come and take a look at the lights and really feel them, and you can ask questions to us or the manufacturers.
We also, we're doing this in conjunction with Armstrong Ceilings. So they have a integrated ceiling system that works with a number of our manufacturers' downlights. So if you're specifying ceilings or walls, it's another great solution. We can help pull that together. The People Space has been around for about 12 years. They have furniture and textile showrooms across the western US. So this is a pop-up center they opened about a year ago at number 2 Embarcadero. And each quarter, we change out different lighting solutions, and they tend to be themed around a variety of verticals. And we'll do a number of events. It's open to the public, and they love when the design community or the construction community uses their center for meetings or events. So something just to make you aware of. We'd love to see you. So
Yeah.
meet the factory, see the products.
I have a residual question, if it's okay. Does the California Energy Code play a role sometimes in what you can and cannot do?
Yes, 100%.
And how has the evolution of the Energy Code affected lighting designs?
That's a big question.
Say in fewer words.
I think, so here's the code, but ultimately what the question is how does it change? How has this changed the way lighting? I think in the very beginning, as we thought about, for instance, the question about track, and knowing you couldn't use track because there were certain watts per square foot I needed to hit. So I think it's corrected itself over time. So what happened was, you couldn't use many layers of light. You had to use the light, just these lights here. That was it. You could only use in a space because they weren't very efficacious lights. Now they're getting much more efficacious, and lighting designers can come back in and do a lot more layers of light. So I think with the technology getting better and better and better, getting the CRI you want, getting the amount of lumens out, making sure we're making sure that luminaires last a lot longer, you can use a lot more layers of light. So I think in the beginning, it swung very much, I can only use usable light. I can't have fun and create that mood I want. And now it's going, I can do all of it.
And so does that kind of suggest that now, the lighting designer who's involved in things like many kind of aesthetic and technical things is at the same time working the energy code compliance when he's doing the lighting design?
Yes and no. It depends. A lot of the big lighting design firms have engineers on staff, but there's also a lighting engineer that you need to work with for big building, for a lot of buildings, for them to sign off on. So there's a partnership between, hey, this is what I want, and here's what I want, what can we do, knowing that I need to hit this, where are we? I think a lot of lighting designers are also very savvy and know this is their business, day in and day out. They know which luminaires they can use, how many to hit code. So I guess it's both. There's a lot of jobs that have an engineer that really help with that, especially with all the back end, all the lights that are all in the other spaces. They all need to be under a certain amount. So that's where the engineer can help, but lighting designers do understand that. We help with that all the time as reps as well.
I'm curious, for preliminary project budgeting, like for a proposal, is there a rule of thumb in terms of what percentage of the construction cost ideally should be allocated to truly work with a lighting designer?
I've heard some numbers thrown out. I think different types of projects have different rules of thumb.
Yes.
I've heard, and because it changes, so
It's a.
yeah, I think, yeah. I don't think there's a rule of thumb. It depends what it is.
From my experience, architects, and maybe even engineers, have their own way of billing their customers. So some people, some architects, they work on an hourly basis with no upper limit. You pay for the time it takes and that. Others, they make a proposal and say, okay, it won't cost more than this. It's a maximum fixed fee, okay? Lighting designers, are they going in those two directions also?
Yes, I think there's also some lighting designers are, well, like, yes, I think both those ways are ways lighting designers get paid, yes. I was thinking, I think certain architecture firms work with certain lighting design firms, and I think there's a minimum amount that they use them, and then there's different ways of billing that.
Let me rephrase my earlier question. For a small commercial project, let's say a small restaurant project, is it feasible to, for a smaller project, is it feasible to engage a lighting designer economically, or do you really need to get into larger scale?
High-end projects.
Yeah, I think higher end projects, there's room for a lighting designer. I think, so for 16500, for instance, that inside team is made up of, I have 2 or 3 lighting designers on that team. So we help day in and day out, choose luminaires, do the calculations, and can really help with budgets to know which luminaires to choose. Is it those beautiful ones from Europe that really focus the light, everything, or you can use more of these, which are fine, right? And so I think you're a lighting reps, and that is part of what we do. And we don't get paid, we get paid by you specifying we represent 100 different lines of light, 100 different manufacturers. If any of those are on your project, we get paid from the manufacturer a percentage. So you don't pay for this service. So it makes a no-brainer. This is, if you're needing help, please reach out. And so maybe it's not me, maybe our inside team can work with you, but we have people who can help you for those projects.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I designed and made a bathroom fixture for our bathroom, which is LED. And the LED was kind of like on a strip, the self-adhering, and I have the transformer, whatever you call it, in there too.
Mhm.
So, that's kind of like you make it one time. It's not like something where you can go in and change the light bulb like these.
Yeah.
So I guess my following question on LEDs is, what is their life expectancy?
There's different ways to talk about life expectancy. How LED manufacturers talk about it is life to a certain percentage of the light output. So L90 is the life or how long it takes to get to 90% of the output, of the original output. L70, which is how we've normally talked about certain lights, which then you get under the usable amount of light that you wanted. And different manufacturers do it different ways. There's certain programs that the Illumination Engineers Society has standard for you to test those things. So you need to test them for a certain amount of time, and you look at that curve, and you extrapolate that curve over time. So, but on spec sheet, you'll see L90, 50,000 hours, or L70, 100,000 hours. For instance, 80,000 hours. 50,000 is an easy, all LED, the LEDs themselves will last. It's the drivers sometimes, that's the first to, and technology is getting better and better every day. But yeah, 50,000 hours is a great way. I think most luminaires will last a lot longer than that.
And then it's just replacing the whole thing usually, right?
No, it depends. It depends, something like that where it's glued into a downlight, for instance, very easy to there's certain retrofit kits. You can take out the thing, put in your driver, in that hole, that same hole you have, and put in a LED version. So there's ways to do it. 2x2 is very easy to change if you don't want to get into the ceiling so that's how to retrofit. But to change over certain, as I was talking about, if you have your LEDs coming down and maybe it's a remote driver in a box, very easy just to change the drivers, if that's what's needed. Most of the time, that's where the failure is, not the luminaire itself.
That's another way of saying, though, that the migration to extensive LED use has been one that has resulted in much lower maintenance owing to bulbs that are going bad.
Yes, yes. And when I was in a manufacturer, I wanted to talk more about that. But what's hard is you all are on the front end of the design. Then it gets bid by a contractor who needs to put it in. Who saves the money? It's the owner or the people, the tenant, who's not changing the light bulbs as much. In a school, that's a conversation to have because they usually have their own people who are changing lights. And you can say, oh, you don't need to touch this for 10 years. And that's part of the conversation to sell different lighting packages or control packages, easier ways to, and so there's different ways to sell it. A lot of control packages we do try to sell to the electrical contractor. It's less power to drop. You just do Cat 5 to each, and that's a cheaper person that can do Cat 5 to each. Something like that. So there's different ways of thinking about long-term cost. And yes, it changes a lot. And those conversations are happening down the value chain as the lighting gets put in. Were there any questions online?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you guys for inviting me and having me here. Thank you, Karen. Rachel.